Hey there and welcome this morning. We have a good one here for you today. Happy Friday to you. Let me just share my screen here. We'll get this. Oh, there we go. Well, my gosh, we have a really good one here today. We're going to talk all about resume today. This is the Ask SelfRecruiter video blog. So if you have questions, you'd like your job search questions answered, whether that's resume, LinkedIn, interviewing, the outreach approach itself, or really any aspect of managing your career, just send in your questions to ask@selfrecruiter.com. That's ask@selfrecruiter.com. Best ones will include right here. In case you have not seen me before, you should know where the advice is coming from. John Krant, author, career coach, and speaker, resume and LinkedIn guru as well. So if your career brand really isn't getting the right luster, shine, or staging that it needs, you really need to work with someone that knows how to elevate your career story, both on the resume, across the LinkedIn profile, and even beginning to change how you speak about yourself. If you'd like to work together, all my stuff is over under my services tab on the SelfRecruiter website. Now, let's get into today's questions. We have a lot of interesting ones today. It's really going to be all about resumes today. So let's just cover an umbrella of why resumes are important before we get to the questions themselves. Resumes tend to be the first point of contact. Not always. That LinkedIn profile is important, as is other social media. But the resume is still generally the initial point of contact, initial beginning to see who you are. Also, the resume, when it's done effectively, is a very important sales tool for whoever's holding it to be able to walk down the hall really without advanced selling skill and be able to sell you to the next person, the next person, the next person. The right resume will continue to sell you even without you there. The wrong resume is just simply going to put people to sleep. And that doesn't work very, very well. Let's move into today's 8 questions. We have a lot of things to cover. I'm going to give you all the detail today. First question is, how long should my resume be? Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say a lot of these questions are covered in detail in my resume renovation lecture. Hopefully you check that out across my different channels. But how long should it be? Really simply, a single sheet of paper. And no, I don't mean a 2-sided sheet of paper. A single side of a single sheet of paper should be your career story. That is what a resume should be. Should not be this old-fashioned CV, which really does not work any longer, even though we may love that format. Should not be this 4, 5, 6-page endless diatribe about yourself. They're never actually going to read it, and it will become very ineffective. A single sheet of paper with just enough detail on it to fill in the background and get them excited about you. Oh, get them in here. Get them on the phone. I can't not speak to this person. That determines how long the resume should be. It's a single sheet of paper. No matter what the background is, it all fits, or we don't know how to edit. And if we don't know how to edit, gosh, I know someone that should maybe work with you and really help you shape that career story. Next question, gosh, should I use a functional or chronological resume? Now, there's so much advice out there. We've seen these different versions over the years, but if the person knows what they're looking at, that's the person you're potentially sending the resume to. If they've dealt with a lot of resumes in the past, there is only one reason, one singular reason why a functional resume exists, and that is to hide defect. Either we have a career break of some sort that was too long and we're trying to cover up that. Maybe we've shifted into 2 or 3 different areas and we look like we really have no specialty. So we try to detail out the different functions. So they want to hire our functions. You know, your functions, your skill, your background, all those deliverable pieces that would be on the functional resume, completely irrelevant without the time reference of skill. When we look at a normal resume, we're looking at the 2 or 3 most recent employers and titles, and not just because that's all we're interested in, because of time relevance of skill. Over time, you lose certain skills. Functional resume completely hides the timeline, essentially, through a little bit of trickery and formatting. And while it may distract for a moment, you're not really going to get the job that you want. Must be a chronological resume in every single case. And yes, when we have certain types of challenges, there's even a way to disguise a functional under a chronological so that really you get the best of both. Stick to chronological. That is what is going to help you. Next question, should I add a profile or skills or qualifications or strengths section to my resume? Possibly, especially when I look at skills, maybe strengths. But once I start to look at profile and qualifications, and you know what this reminds me of? Reminds me of that laundry list of items that tends to collect up at the top of the resume. Everything I've ever been awarded since kindergarten. Here's every core competency I've ever developed. It's a laundry list of nonsense, really trying to accomplish the same thing a functional resume is trying to do. If they see one item they like, oh my gosh, they might bring me in. What that ends up with is a very, very diluted story. So you need to add these very, very carefully, like the skills potentially, maybe a reference or two on strengths. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. But a whole section? No, not really. Maybe you wrap all of that up in a masterful cover letter whose job is to make the persuasive case that you were the one, but not on the resume. Should I use a career objective statement on my resume? Well, if you haven't seen my resume renovation lecture before, I'm a big, big believer that there should not be a single sentence anywhere on your resume. We live in a world where you can no longer get anyone to read virtually anything. Have you noticed how incredibly short the advertising little snippets have gotten? Because no one will actually read anything. So the whole idea of a career objective statement, well, that's really like what I'd like to be someday. And that's going to trigger a reaction of, who cares what you'd like to be? I'm looking for this. I don't care what you'd like to be. I'm looking for this. So my belief is the time for a career objective statement is long past, has to go away, has to disappear, and repurpose all of that wonderful space at the top of your resume for something so crystal clear. It should essentially always be the job that you're pursuing. Whether or not I've ever held the job before, I'm presenting myself as qualified. I'm qualified for this, even if I didn't hold it before. That's the job you're going after. And I call that the positioning statement. Shouldn't be a written out statement because I'm never going to put a sentence on the resume, but do check out my resume renovation lecture. It will walk you through how you create a very simplified 2, 3, even 4 line little chunk at the top that suddenly is visually absorbable. They look at your name, they absorb this, which is the exact job you're going after. They go, oh, just who I'm looking for. And then they begin to look at your contributions right down the page. Next question, should I list company names or job titles first on my resume? By the way, I've seen it done both ways many, many times over the years, but that does not mean both ways are correct. Your value is almost exclusively determined by who you did it for, not your title itself. Your title itself is irrelevant to your value. I know that's very hurtful to hear. It's somewhat irrelevant to your value without the attached brand. So they can imagine who was putting these objectives on you, who had these requirements, who needed this deliverable, and do they rise to the level of how I think of myself? A little very, very positive goodwill there, basically. I would like to acquire those. So company names always go first. And I'll give you one other secret, which is also in my resume renovation lecture, and that is the company names always go in bold, and your title does not go in bold. Oh, I know you'd like it to, but then they're both fighting in the eyes. Oh, who gets the look? Brand determines the value. It gets bold. Your title gets italics without bold, still draws attention. They work in harmony together. Very, very different outcome setting your value. How can I sharpen the focus of my resume? Well, you know, it's what I do with my clients all the time. Most clients come to me with their story really kind of a mess. They don't probably believe it's a mess when they arrive, but it's simply the one vision of the journey that they have in their brain versus there's many still very, very truthful ways to tell the story that could be much more compelling when we put it together. So adding focus is not about adding more content. Adding focus is actually about taking away more content. Many, many clients that I work with when we first start with, they have even a 2 and 3 page resume, or they have 1-page resume that's so densely packed. I mean, it's just this wall of text hitting you in the head like a brick. It's not that so much detail needs to go into those resumes. Oh, I think there's a lot in there. You may have to clarify how much that detail pops, but you do it by removing the extra verbiage, remove all the extra words, release yourself from the need of sentence structure, and that's going to get rid of about 25% of the verbiage right there. Then you can distill it down to simply concept communication. Each thing on the resume becomes a teed up platform for you to speak about. Oh, so interesting. I see bullet number 3. Oh, tell me about that. The good questions always tell me about that. You need very little footprint, but very exciting to set up the story so you can then deliver the story, which shouldn't be on the resume, only the little highlight on the resume. Next question, how should I use keywords in my resume? You know, keywords are incredibly important. I cannot deny that, and we all have to think about it. When we think of the overall hiring system that most of us seem to partake in, this whole apply online, the HR, the screening, everything else, such tremendous volume, because if this is a decent job that you're going after, that's 1,000 to 2,000 resumes being sent in for that job. I didn't say 1,000, 2,000 qualified individuals. 90, 95% of them aren't right for this job. They see some great job and they go, oh, that's a good job. They must have a job for me right around that one. When they see me, they'll want to hire me after they hire this person. And that ends up clogging the entire system. So yes, keywords become important, especially, my gosh, if you're looking to have your resume plucked out of this massive data warehouse, this giant black hole in space is what I call it, that the resumes sit in companies. So yeah, keywords could be important to that applicant tracking system. Oh, it's like a little tag on your ear if you're out in the wildlife. I'm like, oh, I'm being tagged, I'm being followed. Applicant tracking system. It's the magical system that's supposed to use keywords to deliver your resume to the right person. However, doesn't really work. That does not mean the right keywords don't need to be in your resume. They certainly do. But I don't think you need to put it in as a giant block, big keyword block here, here, here. It's simply go back to reworking the resume, the way I teach in the resume renovation lecture, and change your very succinct language to be the right compelling language that also contains the keywords. It's not needing to add extra words. It's needing to utilize the correct words while you tell the story. It's really as simple as that. No keyword section. Keyword section on LinkedIn? Absolutely. Well, for other reasons. We'll talk about that in another video. Next question. Do I need more than one version of my resume? Well, I guess this would depend on when you asked John Krant this question. If we backed up 2-3 decades ago, I very likely might have said, absolutely, you need a new version of the resume for every job that you go after. You have to chameleon your way to the new job from the skill set you're at now. But my knowledge on this, my view on this has evolved. It's not really that we need multiple versions of the resume. What that indicates is we didn't do enough work on the resume. You need to get to the singular, one, correct, most beneficial presentation of all parts of your background so that it's really overwhelming. Wow, how do I not speak to this person? Incredible. Without all the detail, just the ruby, the diamond, the gold, the emerald, the drop of perfume. Those elements only make the sheet of paper. So if the right resume is created, the only thing that actually has to change is that very top space that I began talking about at the top of this broadcast. And that is what I call the positioning title space, or it used to be called the objective statement space up at the top of the resume. And it's about making sure that you understand that that is what should be customized every single time it goes out, because that should represent the exact job you are going after. They pick up your resume, they're looking for a director of whatever, and they go, it says, director of whatever? And it's got the 2, 3, 4, 5 key things that you know would make them jump out of their chair from reading that job description. I see it all. I see it all. I found the perfect person. Yes, you did, because I guided you right to it. It's a single version of the resume, but continually changing position titles. So it's a dead bullseye every single time they pick it up, causing a gasp. Very, very effective. I'm sure there's so many other questions. If we didn't cover your question today, whether it be about resume, LinkedIn, job search itself, the outreach process, planning, whatever you might get stuck on, even negotiations, all those kind of things. Renegotiations, oh my gosh, so scary. Send your questions into ask@selfrecruiter.com. That's ask@selfrecruiter.com. We'll include the best ones in our upcoming broadcasts. And please do share, like, ring the bell, all those kind of fun things. And we will see you very, very soon. Wherever you are in your process, take the very next step, take your first step, and learn how to repeat until you're finally getting to the destination that you'd like. Don't let somebody else think for yourself. You have to find the answer, and come back here for more answers in the future. Thank you guys for joining in today, and we'll see you next week.